the fact that they went to Palestine to create their state for their convenience sake, they had a problem, a technical problem, because they wanted to make a settlement, and the usual way would be that you have an idea, you want to build a state, a country club or something. What do? You buy a land that's for sale. But here they had a problem. They went to Palestine, and Palestine was actually inhabited. The majority were Muslims, and then there was a community. The second was the Christians, and then there were the Jews. That was the smallest community. Also a distinguished community, much smaller than the Muslims. Now the Zionists came and they decided to make their homeland in Palestine, as we've explained, that they'd be able to sell this sell it to the world, because they'll be able to get support from the Christians, the evangelistic Christians, which today have millions of people support that. Like I say, ironically, more than the Jewish people are involved. You have the Jews non-affiliated, the Jews who don't observe the Torah, who don't know the laws of Torah. Some marginally, even unfortunately, went into the religious communities, the ones who were able to be conned by the Zionists. But not the very religious around. But they were able to, so they decided Palestine would be the ideal place to create their state. Now they have a problem, because there are people living there. So first they started buying homes, and actually the Arabs sold areas, sold lots and so forth, because they didn't deem these Jews as a threat, because they had a history. They were living together in harmony, in peace. They did business together. They helped each other. This is a fact of history. You have people today in the 80s, and we have people today who can bear witness, testimony, both from the Muslim community, from the Arab community, and the Jewish community, how they live together in harmony, as they did in Iraq and in Iran and Tunisia and on in Yemen. So, but eventually, the Arab community realized that these people have an agenda. They're not just buying lots. They're not just buying areas. They're here to take over and create this so-called Jewish state. And then they looked at it as a threat, and then the strife began, the rift began, and then the Zionists started taking other actions. They started using the Deir Yassin, the massacre of Deir Yassin, where Deir Yassin was clearly a Jewish friendly to the Jews, a community. They lived together with the Jewish people, and we have old rabbis who talk about this. They bemoan, they cry about what happened in Deir Yassin, what a scandal. They were good with the people in this community, as they were all over. And what they did was what the Zionists did was they did a massacre in this area, here, there, and the Arabs saw this and they panicked and they left. That's what the Zionists wanted. They wanted to create an illusion. They wanted them to see that this is what's going to happen. They should run away. They should and panic leave. So then they were able to say, "Hey, see, the land is empty." They left on their own will, so it's nobody forced them to leave. So now it's free. They kept on using that, and of course there were cases where they murdered them and threw them out. So now what they're doing, this is documented a lot of times through the history, mainly at the beginning of Zionism, for many, many years, the Zionists enjoyed the sole carrier of the microphone, because it was the Western, news medias and so forth, and the Zionists were playing along, gave the information the way they wanted. So they were able to tell the world, it's a land without a people, for a people without a land. In other words, the Jewish people don't have a land, and it's a land without a people. There's nobody living there. And then there was, of course, the strife that they were able to explain away as a few people was just evil people who hated the Jews. Both of these is patently false. It wasn't the land without a people, which today you couldn't sell this bag of goods because everybody has the satellites and the information, internet and so forth. But at that time, they were able to falsify the facts. And they were able to also falsify the facts that the Arabs were enemies of the Jews. This is nothing more scandalous than that. We were living together. We have pictures how Jews live together in harmony. I like to carry around many pictures how the Jews live together in peace. My colleague, who's in the room here, his grandmother I think was sixth generation Palestinian. he's already 8th generation from them, but the 6th generation Palestinian. They lived together for hundreds of years in the same courtyards. They babysat each other's children, the most precious object you have. They helped each other in business. There was nothing, many pictures how they lived together. There's many books and things you can see. It's the historical how they lived together in the same courtyards. There was no human rights groups to protect them. There was no necessity for this. There was the Hebron massacre in the 1920s. Then we have it. There was a Rabbi Baruch Kaplan. His name was. Now Rabbi Baruch Kaplan was a very esteemed rabbi. After the war, he came to the United States and recreated girls' schools for here called Beth Jacob Girls' Schools. Rabbi Kaplan spoke into a tape. We later wrote it down. We have it written down word for word what he spoke, and we transcribed it. He spoke in Yiddish, and we have it transcribed. Anybody can get the original tape. We have that, and we have it in which he talks about the fact that he was in Hebron in the 1920s. He was studying in the Hebron school. There was a rabbinical college. He was studying there. He speaks about how they used to take strolls in the Arab sections as teenagers. It wasn't considered dangerous. There was nothing wrong. They didn't. The rabbis, it was okay. They used to go strolling in the Arab neighborhoods. They were all friendly. They helped each other and so forth. He speaks about then. All of a sudden, the Zionists came. I think it's in 1924. I'm going to take a look at it with the exact date. The Hebron massacre, and they came. The Zionists all of a sudden came into the Hebron on bicycles and with guns. And the dean of the school, I think his name is Rabbi Epstein, called them, sent a message that they should come to him. He's the head of the community. They refused to go to him. They didn't give him the respect as that. So they went out and they went out to this group of Zionists and said, "What are you doing here?" Okay, Rabbi Baruch Kaplan, he lived from 1911 to 1987, and he wrote, "I want to," and this letter that was transcribed. "I want to correct an important error, a terrible error that Jews make. Jews think that the Arabs in Hebron in 1929, it was 1929, were murderers, and they attacked the Jews for the purpose of murder because they were evil. But if we study the facts, this is incorrect. The Arabs were very friendly people, and the Jewish people in Hebron lived together with them and had very friendly relations with them. Today's wicked Zionists are just like the predecessors." He speaks here. It's a letter that you have to. He speaks about that how they came in. The rabbis went to meet with these guys, and they said, "What do you do?" He said, "We came to protect you." He said, "Woe is unto us." They say the language. He said, "Woe, woe is unto us that you're coming here." Why? Because they didn't. What happened was they agitated. The Arabs in Hebron saw these guys coming with guns and everything. And they looked at him as a threat. Now, what happened was there was a massacre in Hebron in 1929. Now, of course, again, we're not condoning the massacre. We're not condoning what Hitler did. We're not condoning any, murder or whatever. We're not right. But just like the people agitate, they brought about that. In the case of Hebron, these were Arabs who were living together with Jews. The Zionists came. They created an atmosphere, a narrative, or something. Somehow when you say that, it looked like the Jews are here in Hebron out to take over. Why? Because they called it the Jewish state, the Jews, and the Arabs didn't know to differentiate. I mean, they knew their neighbors and everything, but they thought, well, we were conned all the time, because they didn't know to differentiate between this Jewish group and their Jewish group. They came with their rabbis also. They made a rabbinate. They made their rabbis. So here all of a sudden they're coming, and they're claiming that it's our land. God gave us the land, and they're going to throw everybody out. So they all of a sudden looked at their neighbors, with suspicion. They didn't trust them anymore. So they went, and of course, it's a very evil thing they did. Of course, they went and they massacred, which is it's unacceptable. You can't condone it. There's no way. It's a total evil. They went and they slaughtered the Jews in Hebron. Now, this Rabbi Kaplan and his fellow students, they were the Arab building where they were like dorming, they were staying in. He went and he locked the doors and he saved them. That's how he was saved. But clearly, the cause, the reason of this massacre in Hebron in 1929 was because of the Zionists. He speaks about that also in that letter. He wrote that for thousands of years, the Jews for the last 1,000 years or something, it was under at least for many hundreds of years, it was under the control of the WAC. Till today, it is under that, and that's the Arab leadership. And they would give the Jews permission. The Jews always had permission to go pray by the Western Wall. It was never a problem. There was no human rights. There was no necessity of police. The Jews would go pray there. Rabbi Sonnenfeld used to always go pray there, and that was what they did for hundreds. Then the Zionists came, and they started demonstrating it's ours. This is our place. So it became a threat for the Arabs, and that's what brought about this agitation and so attacks and the bloodshed. So the Jews were living in peace. The Zionists always love to say, it's the state of Israel. The Arabs were always against us. Even prior to, say, 1929, there was a Hebron massacre. They conveniently leave out that 1929 was well into Zionism, and that they had agitated, they brought about the massacre in Hebron, they brought about all these attacks and everything that was going on in all of Palestine, that the Jews and the Arabs and Muslims it's not a religious conflict. We have to very stress, this is one of the most important issues. This is the issue between the occupation between the Zionist state of Israel and the Palestinian people is nothing to do with the religious conflict. Muslims' religion is 1,000 years or whatever in that area. And the Jewish, our religion is 3,000 years. We were able. Our religion didn't change. Their religion didn't change. They were practicing seriously practicing Islam in all these countries, in the Arab countries, and the Jews were practicing their religion, and yet they flourished amongst the Muslims, and they weren't massacred. They weren't killed. The Jews were living in Palestine, which was under Ottoman Empire, and they weren't murdered. We were living together, helping each other, respecting each other. They respected the rabbis. I heard from a Jew from Iraq how the Arab children used to go and kiss the rabbis. It was accustomed to kiss the corner of their clothes as respect. We lived together. We helped each other. So it has nothing to do with that religious conflict. We should be crying and talking about it all the time, the suffering of the Palestinian people, and it's being done in our name. It wouldn't be accepted in the world. The human rights people are doing because when they were in Rwanda, they didn't. People later said it was a scandal they didn't do. But people being silent when you see people suffering is considered scandalous. But the human rights activists are many times silent for over 70 years of occupation. They went into Gaza. They went, and you could go today. People are living in squalor. They don't have proper food. They don't have proper drink. They don't. The food, the water. Everybody is affected mentally. There's no words how much they're suffering. And yet the world is silent. How could they be silent? It's not that you don't see what's happening, but the reason they're silent is because people say, I'm going to do for human rights, they're willing to do, but I don't want to touch that because I'm going to get attacked as anti-Semitic, or I'm getting involved between two religions. That's a Zionist, willful ploy, but it's not true. It has nothing to do with between the religions. It's a basic, a selfish political movement called Zionism, a flawed political movement of a group of people wanting to have their convenience, their home, and at the cost of another people. That the Torah doesn't permit us. So we cry around the world. I want to just eat like the cherry on the pie, but here you're not allowed to kill or steal. On top of that, there's a concept of showing gratitude for good done to us. I've mentioned through history there was the Inquisition, there was the Crusades. Jews suffered. They were tried. They were forcibly. They were tried they should convert to Christianity. They were expelled from many countries in Europe. I can go through it. Even York. The Jews were burned in York. I went to visit over there. And in Spain. And there's so much Portugal where Jews suffered there. Yet, and where did they go? The Muslim countries embraced the Jews. They took them in. And we flourished there. So we as Jews have to show gratitude. That's a requirement of the Torah. Now the Zionists, in order to be able to legitimize and to be accepted their occupation. So they vilify the Palestinians as if they hate the Jews, and that's the whole problem here. They don't want the Jews to have their state because they hate the Jews. So they're vilifying the people that we should be showing our gratitude, because the people of Palestine were a majority Muslim, and they accepted us, and we lived together. So how dare they, the Zionists, vilify these people who are so good to us? So it's what they call the Nakba, a tragedy in the Palestinians, in the Arabic it's called Nakba. It is a tragedy. From our side, as the Jews, it's a double tragedy and a triple tragedy, because it's being done in our name. The greatest, as I said, our purpose of life is to sanctify God's name. It's desecrating the name of God, because we are coming in the name of religion, in the name of God, and it's being done in our name. They flaunt, they masquerade in this facade of a Star of David, a menorah, Maccabee, all the Jewish symbols, and in that. And Netanyahu always, when he went to the White House, when he went to the Congress, when he goes to the United Nations, he always makes it a point of speaking about the fact that God gave it to us, it was ours. Even though I understand you're coming as a democracy, you're claiming a democracy, but no, subconsciously he has to throw that in, that it's given to us by God, because that's the foundation of the reason that it's ours, and don't even question us, it's ours, and that you should support us. So it's truly a crime. And of course they were able to use concepts of the Torah to con people into supporting them, and to really take the confusion, the lack of knowledge of most Jews, because many were Reformed Jews, many were lacking of knowledge in the Torah, and they were able to use the traditions, the history, the words of the Torah to really fool people into believing what they're doing is proper, acceptable, and on the contrary is to be lauded and respected. They make a rabbinate as window dressing, so whenever they want to, you're not allowed to cut down olive groves, trees, fruit trees. They go to the Arab neighborhoods, they cut everything down, and the Arabs always bemoan this, what they do to the olive groves. It's according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to cut down fruit trees, but they have their rabbi who signs off on everything. Now, I'm not accusing them of not being knowledgeable. Some of them not knowledgeable, but some of them, Deir Yassin, these guys were, encyclopedic minds, but they were rotten apples. They were rotten. They were, in fact, this Rabbi Yusuf, who was very famous by the infamous base, I should say, because he makes these wild statements against the Arabs. These people were students from there's tens of thousands of students from the great rabbis of Jerusalem who were strongly anti-Zionist, and they disowned them. They haram, we would say in Arab and Hebrew, they totally estranged them. They didn't want to have anything to do with them because they became Zionists. So there's a few, and the Zionists look for somebody who's ready to sell their soul, and they make him chief rabbi. They gave him these beautiful clothes, and they make him the chief rabbi, and they give him this respect. So you can always find a rotten apple, a knowledgeable person who totally leaves the folds of the. So that was what they have. They make this rabbinate and chief rabbi, and they're able to con the Jewish youth.